Well, with us today on the Big App Show, I'm very excited about the author of the book that we're going to be discussing today, because it not only just blew me away with the whole concept, but it inspired me, and I think it's actually a very important book. We'll talk about it. The book is Maphead. The author is Ken Jennings. Ken, welcome to the Big App Show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So, Ken, I got to tell you, first of all, and I love physical books, and this cover, immediately I was like, oh, okay, this feels good, it looks good, and wow, it's a Maphead. And I opened it up, and you had me going from like page 3. I was like so into this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how important maps are, not just in general, but in everyone's life, and mine in particular. I was like, wow, what an incredible concept. You have to give us a little bit of the background of being a maphead and growing up, and then we'll talk about some other stuff that you've done, obviously, but to make this book, you have to be a certain type of person.
Yeah, a certain type of pretty weird person.
Well, that's open to whatever you feel about it, yeah.
You put it a little more nicely, but there is something a little bit freakish about it. I mean, I was, at the age of like 6 or 7 years old, I read like world atlases for pleasure, instead of reading Hardy Boys books or whatever a normal kid would be reading. I just had always loved maps, something maybe hardwired in me from birth, to just be fascinated by geography and location and how we represent those things on paper. And that was sort of the impetus behind the book. I was going through a box of stuff in my parents' garage, like stuff of mine from being a kid that they had dug up. And at the very bottom of this box, underneath all these comic books and mixtapes and stuff, there was this huge world atlas that I had saved up all my allowance for months when I was, I think, 7 years old. And all these memories just flooded back of like falling asleep every night reading this atlas. So like it actually slept at the head of my bed by my pillow like a teddy bear. And I was sort of shocked by this like sort of Proustian rush of memory. I was like, wow, I was a weird kid. You know what? what is it that makes a 7-year-old read maps for pleasure? And I sort of wanted to like reconnect with that, to sort of like solve that mystery of why it is that maps and geography speak to certain people. Because I think other people are totally immune. Like they see maps as a source of frustration or panic. Like, which way am I going? Or like, how do I find Nordstrom in this mall? Or, I think maps are unpleasant memories for many people. But I had all this nostalgia, and I sort of wanted to dig at that and see what makes it tick. So
the book is kind of, in a way, the way it came across to me is inspirational in a way that's saying, hey, we should kind of continue to look at maps because it's really important. And for you, maybe that just came out as a kid, but I would wager to say that as humans, we're intricately connected to the idea of geospatial awareness and geography and really knowing where we are or where places are. And when you get beyond it's about naming capitals of cities, etc. And you do some amazing, you just open up amazing areas of maps in this book. I think it's something that everyone inherently really does have built into them. I mean, that's at least what I'm getting from your book and the way it came across to me. Do you still think that we're a very small club of weird people?
I certainly hope the book speaks to people who did not read atlases for pleasure at age 7, but I think maybe a lot of us do have this map urge that sort of gets beaten out of us by society. I guess evolutionarily, we must have evolved to be able to navigate through spaces, find our ways, find shortcuts, remember where we were yesterday, back when we were hunting and gathering. I assume somewhere in our brain those neurons are still there, and it is still important nowadays that we, know where we are and where to find ourselves. Maybe GPS is dulling that, but I think the person who's not lost is always better off than the person who feels like they might get lost at any second. And you're always reading these headlines about how terrible American students in particular are at geographic knowledge, and they can't find Canada on a map, and they can't find the Pacific Ocean. Some huge percentage of young Americans can't do the easiest geographic tasks, and that sort of gave me pause. These are the people that are going to be voting in elections, and they might not know where Iraq or Afghanistan are, like how are we going to make well-informed decisions about anything, much less the world, if we don't know our place in it?
Well, I have a couple of theories about that, which I'll definitely get to. In fact, you talk about how that meme really started in 1984 with this professor who did this test in, was it University of Miami? And
right.
that got, all of a sudden it just caught fire, and then everyone was out there, all the media was saying, oh, we're so stupid, even the kids at UM can't even point to Miami on the map. And from that actually came a whole industry, like games of where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, and all of this. It really started an interesting revolution. What to me I think was interesting is you point out that important events like assassination of JFK, 9/11, just as a broad reach there, that people always know exactly where they were, and that's very interesting. Whereas if people, most people, I would say, if they're trying to remember something, as you even write, well, let's see, the Boston, the Red Sox were doing this, and they relate history and memory to different events, and not necessarily to places. But there's this other book, I think it's Moonwalking with Elvis, I think is what it's called. Have you read this book?
With Einstein.
With Einstein, thank you. And it's about memory. It didn't work that well on me. But Moonwalking with Einstein, about a journalist who winds up entering into a memory competition and really becomes extremely good. And one of the main tricks is memorizing things based upon a physical place. So these memory junkies, they have houses that they buy Architectural Digest, etc., just to have different visualizations of where they put certain pieces of information. That's how they actually remember decks of cards, etc. So I think it's really linked into that, and probably, I'm just guessing, and this is where I want to go with you, into your incredibly successful I don't want to say career, but I want to say in your incredible financial success and fame in trivia, in Jeopardy. You've been on a number of these, a number of trivia-based game shows, and in fact, I think you still hold the record for most winnings ever on Jeopardy, don't you?
Right. Yeah, most wins, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I thought the same thing when I read that memory book. Like pretty much, it turned out the best way to remember any kind of facts was to put it in a place, in a geography. And so I guess that must be sort of the most primal thing. That's what our brain is built to be best at remembering, is the world around us and how to navigate from place to place, what routes are better, what shortcuts are better. And that's so powerful that you can use it to memorize, yeah, like you say, the order of the presidents or decks of cards or, and I've certainly done some of those tricks trying to remember facts and remember trivia as well, the stuff that doesn't really stick well. Maybe some people are better than that than others. Maybe some people are better spatial thinkers than others, and that's the kind of person that tends to be a Maphead. But I think you're right. I think it turns out that that's how everyone remembers stuff. That the place is very important to how we tell our stories. Obviously, it's not relevant in any way to the Challenger incident that I was in my elementary school cafeteria when it happened. It's not an important part of the story, but that's how I tell it. And that's what people want to know. Where were you when you heard about 9/11? It doesn't matter, but somehow the location is very essential to how we see ourselves in the story. So
do you think that this geospatial awareness that you've had as a kid and this interest in maps and places, I'm sure that you don't go out to conquer Jeopardy and read Wikipedia. It's like you had this knowledge or not. Do you think that stuff just stuck in your head more because you were always relating it to places?
I know that when I was a kid, looking at maps was the first time that I was really aware, wow, the world is just so packed with information, and wouldn't it be cool to know it, to know some of it, and fun to retrieve that, and be the expert on something, and since then I've sort of become a sponge for unimportant information in lots of fields. But I remember looking at a page of Atlas just crammed with millions of facts and captions. That was the first time I ever really had that feeling that knowing stuff was fun, that information was fun. And yeah, learning new things, I always seem to connect it to places, you learn a new fact about, something about history, I have a much easier time remembering something about the history of, you know, when I learn some new fact about the history of France or China or whatever it is, I picture the map, you know. If I've been there, I picture myself there and what I remember of the place, you know, Venice or Tokyo or whatever it is. I picture the map and what's near there, and so if there is some structure to all the things that I know, yeah, maybe it's built on a map of the world.
So you go through so many different types of maps. I think it's really important to explain to the viewers that we're not just talking about, you know, an atlas per se, but there's so many. You know, you even go into geocaching. You talk about fellow map heads. I mean, obviously the red line throughout the entire book is maps. What would you say is really the main message in this book, other than, I think, to inspire people about maps?
I was really interested in all the subcultures that formed around maps, you know, because for me, maps were a very solitary pursuit, just, you know, sitting at home looking at my atlas or, you know, whatever it was. But each chapter in the book is effectively a different group of people that love geography but manifest that in different ways. You know, you've got people who collect destinations. You know, there's a club for people who have been to over 100 different countries of the world, and these people get very obsessive about their personal checklist of destinations. You've got the kids that compete in the National Geographic Bee every year, who are just amazing prodigies. You've got people who enjoy GPS games, like geocaching, you know, where the fun of the game is just knowing your exact latitude and longitude on a little box at any moment, because you're talking to some billion-dollar array of satellites and military satellites, and it's telling you how to find a piece of Tupperware in the woods or whatever, doing a little scavenger.
Yeah.
You know, and then you got antique map collectors, you got road geeks who are obsessed with the interstate system, all these little weird subcultures that have managed to find each other in the age of the internet. And I wanted to know, like, what do they all have something in common? I hope so, because I've got an advance to write this book. I hope it says something about it. What I came away with was that these were all people that were explorers, in a way. You know, they had the bad luck to be born into a time when the world is pretty much explored. You know, you look at a map of the world now, and there's none of these alluring blank places, you know, the center of darkest Africa or the Northwest Passage or whatever. You know, there's really nowhere left to explore, at least on this planet. And so with the lack of that, these people sort of reinvent exploration. They make the map new. They find new games to play on it, new ways to arrange its information, new goals to create for themselves in an already explored world. 500 years ago, they would have been Magellan or Columbus, and today they're on a scavenger hunt for Tupperware in the woods, because that's how we have to explore in the 21st century.
Well, of course, the maps, of course, are also changing all the time. We're seeing boundaries being redrawn and entire countries being renamed. There's all kinds of interesting things that happens with maps. And I'm interested in your view in this. I think that you're right. There's basically no place left to be explored. Everything is known. This is the general statement. I don't know when geography and maps really even come into the educational system anymore. And then we have, enter Google Maps and Google Earth, which I, on one hand, think is a great thing because you have a very easy access to maps. But on the other hand, I think it's actually quite damaging because people typically will just zoom down into, the 20 square miles that they're going to be driving or walking or whatever, and really don't get that entire geospatial effect. What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, I remember noticing that the first time I saw one of these amazing satellite imagery web browsers, the kind that later turned into Google Earth. And the first thing I did was go look for the roof of my own house. And I remember thinking, I have the whole world here. I could be looking at the North Pole. I could be finding shipwrecks. I could be looking at trackless jungles. But I wanted to see, the basketball court out back of my house, from space. And I think both possibilities are definitely there. In this new age of digital mapping and interactive maps and maps that we carry with us on our phones, that could be very cool. That could be something that totally changes the way we see geography. Maps have been about the same for 500 years, and now we've got these cool maps where, I can travel 3D through the Grand Canyon, or I can see where all my friends are after work in real time. The idea of a map where my friends move across it, that was so crazy 10 years ago. It was like a magical plot device in a Harry Potter book, and now most of us have it in our phones. So this is a sea change for maps, and maybe maps will seem cool and sexy for the first time in centuries. But But I am afraid of what you said also, that the GPS in particular will just take away the last of our ability to navigate. You know, we will let a little talking box in our car tell us where to go. You know, we'll just focus on where we are at the moment and which way we need to turn. You know, just like me having the whole earth in front of me and just wanting to see the roof of my house. You know, there's other possibilities. There's wider horizons. I wrote a piece for a New York newspaper op-ed where I proposed that at least one day a week we should just turn off our GPS and like not kill that part of our brain that actually knows how to navigate from place to place.
You know, so I'll tell you one story. I was in Bonaire, and I know you know where that is because you actually mentioned the Netherlands Antilles in the book. And a friend of mine has a house there, and he's like 15 years older than I am. And a big cruise ship was leaving. And we're sitting on his balcony. He's like, I wonder if they're going to Curacao. And so I whip out my smartphone, and I'm like, immediately like, I have the central ship navigational system. Like, okay, it's exactly here. It's traveling at 7 knots. It's headed straight towards Curacao. And he had actually unfolded a map. He said, man, there's no fucking romance in that. Don't do that. Let's look at it. Let's position it, and let's dream about, you know. And it was really nice, you know. Of course, it was Bonaire, and it's, you know, you've got the sea and the sun, and there's some romance to it. But I have to say, now looking at the news, we have all of this Syria hype, I'll call it, and I'm a student of the so-called news, and they really are. You know, they're showing video of, you know, explosion here, explosion there. But the most important map, which exists, and I've brought these up myself, are the maps of pipelines, and the geographical importance of places like Turkey and Cyprus, and how gas is flowing, you know, from Russia through Turkey into Europe, and how there's a new gas field off the coast of Israel, and that's going to be piped through Greece, through Italy into Europe, and you can start to understand, you know, that, you know, these explosions are about pipelines are actually being blown up, and not just, you know, random places. And I have a feeling, Ken, I'm really curious about what your thought is. I have a feeling that there is a very slow but probably coordinated effort to take maps away from us so we don't really see these things for what they are. We are not, Syria is just some guy, some CNN reporter in a broken, you know, home with a crack in the wall telling us what's happening, instead of, you know, a spot in a very interesting location in a particular part of the world where there's certain types of resources. All information that can be found on maps. I am conspiratorial in my thinking, but I really believe that from the educational system up, there's just kind of like, let's not have anyone really look at maps anymore.
You know, I remember, this is in the book, like back in the 40s, in the run-up to World War II and during the war itself, you know, President Roosevelt would actually say in his fireside chats, like, go out and get a map, you know, like, you're gonna need a map to understand this, you know, and then he'd give a fireside chat and he'd be like, okay, follow along with me. Here's Belgium, here's North Africa, you know, and he would explain the war and the situation in Europe to people in that way. You know, he'd encourage you to unroll your map on the dining room table and follow along at home. And yeah, can you imagine like a president doing that today? Like, get your maps? Like, nobody would have a map. Nobody would know what to do.
But yet everybody has a map. That's the craziest thing. You could be watching the president on TV and pull out your phone and actually do it.
Exactly, exactly. You know, we have this amazing capability, and yet our knowledge is like, you know, much less than it was back then. It actually used to drive globe sales. Like, current events would drive globe sales. There were lines around the block to buy a globe the day after Pearl Harbor, you know? And nowadays, there's just no uptake. No matter what happens in the world, map and globe manufacturers say we don't see an uptake. And that's really scary to me, you know? Like, something like 9/11 will happen and nobody wants to see a map of the Middle East. And that really worries me. These are, like I said, these are the people that are going to be voting, and some of them eventually are going to be in public policy. And, like, maps are a tremendously elegant way to understand pretty much anything about the world. I mean, our horizon is 3 miles away. If you look around, like, you can never see more than 3 miles in any direction. So life becomes this challenge of how do you understand the things that are further away from you than that, because many of them today are super important. 1,000 years ago, not so much. Today, yes, like all the time, things are going to happen on the other side of the earth that could totally affect you. And maps are the best way to understand that. And we're wasting that opportunity if we let ourselves be cowed by them, or if we feel ignorant about them, or if we never look at them.
So do you think there's hope? Can we turn this around, Ken?
I feel like there is hope. You know, I feel like the hope is maybe an increasingly global society where we realize we're more reliant on each other than ever before, that it does matter what happens to me. You know, the economy in Greece matters to me, or, you know, extremists in Pakistan matter to me. Whatever these things are that seem far away, actually they can, like, totally affect my life. And then we're going to, like I said, have these amazing new digital tools that actually make maps seem fun to kids. You know, I'll be the first to admit that a geography class in a 1950s public school was probably not that fun. You know, I can see why a generation of kids might have been like, geography, is that the thing with the state capitals? That sucks.
Right.
But today, if you've got, you know, some cool map on your computer where you're, like I say, flying through the Grand Canyon, or, you know, you can see shipwrecks in 3D, or you can see melting polar ice, or, you know, whatever it is, when you got those amazing interactive maps, maybe instead a kid will be like, whoa, like, this is like really the best way to understand this stuff. This is something I couldn't see in any other way, and maybe we'll all grow up to be a utopia of Maphead. That's the dream, I guess.
Now, it would be nice. I personally, I'm an aviator, so I'm completely into aviation maps. You ever done any flying?
I have never flown, but, you know, when I'm even just on a passenger jet, you know, I remember opening up my laptop back in the 90s to try to find out, you know, what's that lake, you know, where am I? You know, flying really, I think, can turn anybody into a mapper.
But aviation maps, if you ever have a chance to look into them, they're really fun because you have all these zones, and I mean, it's all divided. It's imaginary lines. Some of them are marked by, you know, streams, rivers, coastlines, etc. But there's, you know, there are boundaries, and it's literally called the boundary, and it's an airspace. It's not like you fly through a red line and you know that you're supposed to talk to a different air traffic control, but it's there, and it's something you might enjoy just as a one map head to another. I did want to ask you something, Ken. So you did the famous Jeopardy challenge against Watson, the big IBM computer.
Right.
And this episode pissed me off because I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is such a scam. I mean, we know that, I mean, yeah, you know, if you're sitting there and you're connected to Google and you got some guy entering I don't know if you can even talk about this based upon whatever, you know, you might have had to sign with the production company, but come on, man. I mean, that whole episode, what was that all about? I mean, that was unfair.
I think there were some things about it that were not designed to be super fair to the humans. I mean, IBM had a great platform there, and they wanted to make a marketing opportunity of it. And to be fair to Watson, it can do amazing things that computers have never been able to do before. I mean, retrieving information from Google, sure, you know, we can all do that. But, you know, Watson had to understand a very tricky little question written in English, process out, you know, what's a hint, what's a misdirection, what's a red herring, what's a joke.
But you really think it was doing all that? But Ken, was it really? Tell me there wasn't some guy in the background just sitting on Google and Wikipedia. I just can't. I cannot. I mean, I've been in the computer business a long time. I just don't think computers are there yet. I don't believe it.
You know, a lot of the things it was doing was more naive than it seemed. You know, like it would, you know, it would find which words were more likely to be important, and it would have a massive text bank, you know, same way Google does, and it would run those words against its test bank and see what turned up. You know, it wasn't thinking about the question quite the same way a human does, but it was doing a simpler version of that. The real advantage it had was on the buzzer. You know, it has computer speed reflexes, and we have, you know, pathetic human speed reflexes. And it turned out it couldn't keep up. I mean, it was not quite as good as a human player in terms of question answering, but it was so much faster that it really didn't matter.
Well, I'll tell you why it actually made me angry is because I'm very against the humanization of technology, and you know now, and I agree, it was a brilliant PR and marketing move on IBM's side, and now we're going to. I guarantee you, when we're going to see more and more of Watson now being the authority figure, because Watson, you know, kicked your ass at Jeopardy. So now Watson is the smartest thing in the world. It's going to tell you what medication you should have, what auto insurance you should have. If it can, you know, if they continue on this marketing path, I find that it's like Siri. Have you seen Siri on the iPhone 4? What do you think about that?
I have Siri in my pocket right now.
Now, do you really talk to this like it's a human being and you like its answers and you're really into that?
I found with Watson in particular, it was very hard to just think of it as it. You know, the temptation was always there to be like he and talk to the flat screen avatar as if it were really its seat of consciousness. You know, and yeah, that anthropomorphizing urge is very strong. And I'm totally with you. We need to be aware of that.
Yeah, and Siri is, you know, got like this sexy female voice. I mean, I'm just saying. I need you on my side, man. This is dangerous stuff they're doing.
I'm with you. Like, as soon as I found out Siri couldn't do movie times or sports results, I was like, nah. I'm with you. I'm not so much a fan.
Now, did I read in the ever official Book of Knowledge, Wikipedia, that you were actually approached by Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer to run for, was it Senate or for Congress?
It was for the Senate. It was for Orrin Hatch's seat. I was living in Utah at the time, and I think they needed a sacrificial lamb to run as a Democrat against Hatch's very safe Senate seat. It's always hard to find a Democrat to run a, you know, put up a brave fight in Utah politics. Mm-hmm. And so I got some phone call. Oh, you were on a game show. You got national appeal. You should run for office. And I really never wanted to run for public office in my life, but this idea I thought was just made me laugh. The idea that if you won on a game show in America now, you were a viable candidate for public office. That amused and terrified me at the same time.
Now, was it actually Harry Reid and/or Chuck Schumer themselves who called you?
Yeah, I'd met Senator Reid at some kind of alumni event in D.C. We're both Mormon, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Mormon Democrats. There's a few of us. And so I had chatted with him a bit. And later on, he called me to say, hey, we're looking for somebody in Utah. And then he got Senator Schumer to call me as well. I guess Schumer had been on a game show, like back in the 60s. He was a two-time $64,000 question champion or something.
Wait a minute, who was that? Who did that?
Senator Schumer, I guess, has a quiz show pass.
No.
I had no idea.
I got to look this one up. Oh, that's great. I love it. But you turned him down. And in Wikipedia, it says there's some quote from you that says like, "That's why I knew the Democratic Party was completely fucked." Is that true? Is that really your quote?
That is what I said in an interview. Just because I realized, you know, if they're recruiting game show contestants for this midterm election, you know, that's not a good sign.
Ken, I got to tell you, if they come back at you, man, you should do it because we need people like you in Washington. Seriously, think about that.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your endorsement. That'll come in handy if I decide to run.
Oh yeah, you'll get a lot of wackos from Texas who will be like, yeah, that guy's good. Ken, it's just been a joy talking to you. And again, the book is Maphead. It is a phenomenal book. It's literally the most favorite book, the one I enjoyed the most in at least a year that I've read anything. I read 2 books a week, and it just inspired me. I pulled out atlases. I'm like, oh wow, I've been thinking about. As I said, that maps are more important now than ever, and it's been a fantastic read. How long has this been out? How is it doing?
It came out in September, and it's been doing great. They've been back to press with it like 4 or 5 times, and I had a really strong Christmas. I guess everybody knows a Maphead, and they wanted to buy it for Dad, the Atlas geek, or whatever. And so it's done really well. It comes out in paperback in April.
Fantastic. Are you? How about a line of your own maps? I mean, have you thought? I'm sure someone's approached you about this.
I love maps. I don't know if I have some. I don't know if I have some can't miss idea for innovating maps. I don't know what the Ken Jennings map would look like. But I can sort of see what we were talking about. A map that sort of has somehow as a foundation for all the facts that you can build on top of it. I don't really know what it looks like, but there might be something there.
What are you working on? Another book? What are your plans from here? I mean, this is you have interesting paths that you can take.
Yeah, I sort of lucked into writing, something I always wanted to try, just on the back of Jeopardy, and so far I'm making a go of it. I got a new book coming out next winter, early 2013, about it's a trivia book about some of the things that we tell our kids, even though we don't know if they're true or not. The way our parents always told us, don't sit too close to the TV, or don't go swimming after you eat.
No, that turns out that was true. You watch too much TV, your brains will rot. That's how I grew up, and guess what?
Well, that's the point of the book, to sort of look at the science and debunk which of these things are actually true. Like, is it okay to pop my knuckles but not drink my milk, or
Oh, great! I
look
look
at the
forward
actual
to that.
science.
Oh, cool. Well, I hope you'll come back on when that book is out. And are you going to do any more TV show stuff? I mean, it seems like kind of an easy way to make money.
Yeah, we're not exactly living in a boom time for game shows, but every time somebody calls and says, "Hey, would you like to do a quiz show?" I'm always there. I mean, irrespective of the money, it's just the most fun I've ever had playing some fast-paced, high-stakes game on TV. It's you get hooked on the adrenaline, as geeky as that sounds. So yeah, if the game show ever calls, I'm there. We're not exactly living in a boom time for game shows, but if the phone rings, I'm there.
All right, Ken, thanks again. Everybody, once again, it is Maphead Ken Jennings. If you want this, all you have to do is tap on the blue button or click on the link, take you right into Amazon. You can pick up a copy, and I'm sure everybody has a couple of Mapheads in their life, and this is definitely a gift that keeps on giving. Ken, thanks again. Good luck with everything, and hopefully we'll speak again with your next book in the winter.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much. I'm glad you liked the book.